so taken with this that she called Emily out, who was already sitting down, and said that she just offered Southwick Revival quite a hefty sponsorship that would have been going to the Portsmouth D-Day 80 from Lockheed Martin. And Emily said, absolutely, we'd rather be sponsoring Southwick Revival than the Portsmouth commemoration. So we're very grateful to you. And we've
Yeah, I mean, Lockheed's been involved from the very beginning. I've supplied our Hudson bombers to this endeavour right up till now. And if you go down to the docks down at Portsmouth, you'll see our F-35 job jets on the carrier. You'll see the Merlin Mark II anti-submarine warfare capability. Only 12 miles down the road is 470 British passport holders supplying capability to keep our nation safe today, as we have since when we were called to help in this endeavour. I am proud. 1,600 people that work for Lockheed Martin are proud of our history and our continuing support of keeping what we hold and what some brave people that went before us made sure that the freedoms we have today are kept. That's our promise to the nation, and I'm really, really pleased to be here today and delighted, so thank you.
We just wondered if we could get ITV to ask you a few questions. Is that all right?
That's fine. Right, so that everyone can try and get on with their thing. I've just set up in the other room, so when you're ready, I'll see you in the other room. Okay. Don't want to disturb anybody else's experience here.
Okay, where's the Colonel gone?
He's just come down for a second.
I'm here, Martin. Are you free? Do you want me?
We were hoping for a short briefing.
Okay, all right. I'll try to be brief.
But yes, try to. It's difficult.
Martin's incorrectly read. The squires. What can I say about this place? D-Day and Normandy was the most complex operation ever mounted in human history. And it staggers me to this day, the level of planning that was required. I pay tribute particularly already to Admiral Sir Bertrand Ramsay, but I also want to pay tribute to a man called Eisenhower, because without Eisenhower we would have lost the Second World War. I know Susan's going to blush. Ike was an incredible man, absolutely incredible. My admiration for him has grown over the years that I've studied him. He was influenced by a man called Fox Connor, who was a Major General the Americans almost forgot, a bit like Ramsay. And he created the winning team for the Second World War by selecting people like George C. Marshall, George S. Patton Jr., Lucian Truscott, names that you're all really familiar with, and of course Ike. And he took Ike down to Panama as his executive officer and schooled him to fight a coalition war with allies. So when Ike came here to command the European theatre of operations for the Americans, he was well prepared. But it was his nature and his character that carried a very fractious coalition to its glorious conclusions in 1945. Now, Ike had an enormously bad temper, I think that's true. And he spent his entire life trying to control it. And occasionally here, under the great stresses and strains that he was under, it would flash up. He was smoking 4 packets of cigarettes a day, Camel, I understand, was it? Untipped, I was told. He was sleeping little, eating little, and he was playing a tinnitus in his right ear. But he had been empowered by Roosevelt and Churchill to make the decision to launch D-Day. And I struggle to find a recent example in history where a general or a commander has been given that authority and a politician wouldn't second guess it. And that's demonstrative of the faith that both FDR had and Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill said to him, "We have given you more power than a Caesar." Now, Ike had a very difficult relationship with Churchill. He admired him greatly, but he really hated being dragged to Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country home, to be in a unheated, no central heating in the UK then, to be given Irish stew and be regaled into the small hours by Churchill. And he said, you know, he would cover every subject from William Shakespeare, Napoleon and Donald Duck. And one night, Ike's aide had forgotten the General's pyjamas, and he was then given a nightshirt by Churchill's butler. Now, Ike was a very slim, fit man. Churchill not so, a bit like me, Churchillian, or anyway, Rumpelian, whatever it is. And Eisenhower had a very disturbed night because he hated Irish stew. The house was cold. He narrowly escaped Churchill going into another 45-minute monologue, and he woke up thinking he was being strangled. That someone was strangling him. He was absolutely tied up in his four-post bed in the voluminous nightgown that Churchill killed him. And I understand after that your grandfather never liked Irish stew as well. So.
I'm not familiar with that, but it's a great story, isn't it? No, it's a real story.
Yeah, it is.
And of course here, he made the decision first to postpone the invasion and then to launch it. And I think that was a decision that weighed heavily on him. The final thing I'd like to say is the third person, or fourth person in my liturgy, if you like, is James Stagg. And James Stagg was a Dur Scott selected to be the senior meteorological advisor to Eisenhower, and the Brits were determined that Eisenhower had to be briefed by one person, because we all have a view about the weather. Apparently, Brits spend 4.5 months of their life discussing the weather. There's a statistic for you. Anyway, cut long story short, Stagg was not a meteorologist, he's a geophysicist, but he and Eisenhower struck a very, very close and trusting relationship. Because Eisenhower had to base the decision on the optimum weather forecast for all the components in this operation. The Navy wanted something different from the Army and so on and so forth. And Stagg describes the General's eyes, they were like barometers. He knew my forecast before I even gave it. And that relationship was key. I'm very struck that you have a military man, an utter professional soldier like Eisenhower, and a civilian meteorologist, a scientist. And that key relationship with those two men, and I think the impact of the D-Day decision on both of them was profound. And I'm just glad that it was pre-computer, it was worked out with a pencil, and a bit of shrapnel in the leg perhaps moving when the weather was changing and all that sort of stuff. And they got it right, and thank God they did. So thank you for coming, and thank you especially for coming to represent your amazing ancestors and relatives. And Will's smiling all over his face, just like his dad.
We are going to take the Royce to...
It helps, yeah, I've got one as well. The stabiliser. So you can't walk around with it. It's there you go. Yeah, it is.